Thanks again for joining us, and we've been following closely developments from the collapse of the major bridge in the U.S. city of Baltimore after it crashed into the Patapsco River when a container ship crashed into it. The bridge snapped and plunged into the river at 1:30 a.m. local time, along with vehicles and people. Authorities are currently looking for 6 people who fell into the water. They already rescued 2 others. They're believed to be part of a construction crew that was repairing potholes at the time of the bridge collapse. The ship which caused the collapse is now wedged into debris from the Francis Scott Key Bridge. Reports say it suffered a power issue and issued a distress call just moments before the crash. In the meantime, the governor of Maryland, Wes Moore, has declared a state of emergency. A statement by the owners of the Singapore flat container ship indicated that the vessel collided with one of the pillars of the bridge, adding that all crew members and pilots have been accounted for. Baltimore Police Chief Richard Worley says there's no indication of terrorism and there is no evidence the collision was intentional, adding that the FBI and other federal and state agencies are working to gather all necessary intelligence. We'll have more from our correspondent Maria Bird later on the program. It's been over 24 hours since the United Nations Security Council adopted a resolution demanding a ceasefire in Gaza, but a whole lot of the exact opposite has happened as fighting continues in the besieged Strip. Israeli forces say they carried out attacks on more than 60 terror targets in Gaza. 18 people, including 9 children, have been killed in overnight Israeli airstrikes on a residential building on the outskirts of the southern city of Rafah. Similarly, an Israeli airstrike on a family home near Al-Shifa Hospital has killed 30 people. We're also learning Al-Amal Hospital in southern Gaza is out of service after the Israeli military forced at least 27 medical staff and 6 patients to evacuate the facility. Elsewhere, Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh is in Iran. He's met with Foreign Minister Hussein Amir-Abdollahian in the capital, Tehran. During the meeting, the leader said Palestinians have shown legendary resistance during the war, adding that political support for Israel is now faltering. This marks his 2nd visit to Iran since the war broke out. He praised Iran for standing at the forefront of supporting the cause and nation of Palestine. A clock is also ticking for the UN Palestinian Refugee Agency, UNRWA, which is running out of funding. The agency chief, Philippe Lazzarini, says UNRWA has sufficient funds, but only up until the end of May. Over 10 countries suspended funding to the agency in January over accusations its staff were involved in the October 7 Hamas attacks. The Gaza Health Ministry has put the death toll so far of people killed in the Strip at over 32,000 and more than 74,000 people injured since the offensive began. In another development, South Africa's Minister of International Relations, Naledi Pandor, has drawn courage from the UN Security Council resolution calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza throughout the remainder of the holy month of Ramadan. It marks a significant development as it's the first time the Council has made such a call since the onset of the conflict in October, following several unsuccessful attempts. Ramadan commenced on March 10th and is scheduled to conclude on April 9th. Minister Pandor hailed this initiative as a positive step towards signaling progress in the ongoing efforts to promote peace and stability in the region.
South Africa has called for a ceasefire for many weeks, and we're very pleased that at last the Security Council has agreed on a resolution calling for a ceasefire for a long-term period during this month of Ramadan, but also proposing that work should begin toward a permanent ceasefire. I think this is a welcome resolution, and now the ball is in the court of the Security Council because they'll be tested as to their ability to ensure adherence to the resolution. But on having agreed a resolution, having tabled it, and passed by the majority of the members, this is certainly an encouraging step. Well, our visit to the United States continues work that has been started by President Ramaphosa to affirm the very positive relationship between South Africa and the United States of America, and to continue to advocate for a greater economic partnership between the two countries, as well as continued participation of South Africa in the American Growth and Opportunities Act, which allows for preferential trade for a number of African countries, including South Africa. We had indicated concern at some of the resolutions and legislative proposal that were before the House of Representatives. And part of our mission is to engage political office bearers in the United States to set out the position of South Africa on the long-term question.
Return to our lead story now this hour, the collapse of the Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore in the middle of the night. It was caused by a Singapore-flagged container ship which suffered a power issue and issued a distress call moments just before the crash. We're learning more about the situation. Governor of the state of Maryland, Wes Moore, and other senior officials addressed a press conference a few moments ago. He said the cargo ship's operators called a mayday, an emergency signal, but the vessel's speed appeared to be too fast to avoid the incident. However, he said the distress call did ensure more cars were stopped from crossing the bridge, averting greater disaster. He says the bridge will be built in a way that remembers the people the tragedy has impacted and honors the community it serves. The FBI has also been commenting on the disaster. Special Agent Bill Del Bagno confirmed there is no credible information that terrorism could be behind the bridge collapse. A probe is ongoing into the crash. Senator Chris Van Hollen from Maryland says the federal government has provided support, including the U.S. Coast Guard, who are assisting with the ongoing search and rescue mission. Let's bring in now our correspondent in Washington, Maria Bird, who's been keeping an eye on the situation. Maria, Washington is not far from Maryland. How has this impacted on the people in Washington?
Well, obviously, the hearts and condolences to those who are directly impacted by this. And as you said, the proximity between Washington and Baltimore is less than 30 miles, so it's very close in proximity to the areas of concern around kind of traffic. Obviously, this does have a heavy impact on commuting throughout the area. There are many people that live in Baltimore, work in Washington, many people that live right outside of Washington that work in Baltimore. So this obviously has an infrastructure impact for the area as well. So there's much that we're going to obviously be learning over the next few hours, days. This is going to be a long-term challenge for the region as a whole, as even when we talk about transport and as we talk about goods making it to the area. Baltimore is a major port of export and import for the area as well. So Washington will be impacted by that as well.
Yeah, and just moments before the Governor Wes Moore, the FBI and other Maryland officials commented on the incident, each of them describing, what areas they're concerned with and the support that's coming from the federal government. The senator says there is support coming from the federal government. But I'm just wondering, if the federal government itself has said anything about this tragic incident.
Just moments ago, President Biden, made remarks in regards to this, obviously sending his condolences and his support to all of those in Maryland that are impacted by this. And clearly, as you mentioned, it's close proximity. So he will obviously be sending federal support as he has already done, and obviously in the weeks and days ahead. But furthermore, we're going to definitely see him speaking on this as it relates to the infrastructure. We've heard President Biden talking talking about infrastructure bills, infrastructure challenges throughout his administration. And this is going to further double down on why there's so much money being spent on the infrastructure and rebuilding the infrastructure across the United States.
Yeah, and this probably had something to do with infrastructure. I mean, the people who died were on the bridge repairing potholes. But then there's also the ship that was on its way and then obviously lost control and was calling for help. Have there been any updates regarding the rescue operation currently going on? We know 2 people have been rescued, but 6 more are still missing.
Yes, and they're still underway. Obviously, the temperature of the water is a concern for the individuals. There's obviously great concern as to the number of hours that have gone past. At this point, it happened at 1:30 in the morning. We are now at 12:30 in the afternoon in the Eastern Standard Region. And so that's a lot of time has gone past. Even though it is a bridge and and the water is a bit vast, we're still talking about a river. So you would expect that by now, if there were survivors, potentially we would have seen that through the rescue efforts, but they're still calling this a rescue effort, and they have not yet given up hope for the remaining individuals, as you mentioned, that work on the bridge during the late night hours to repair the bridge.
And I hear officials clearly denying any terrorism in this incident. Why is it important, Maria, for them to emphasize this? Has Maryland ever come under any terrorist threat whatsoever, even before now?
I think that's critical and vital, as you mentioned, the close proximity to Washington, thinking about areas of transport, that's being one of the major hubs of import and export of ships in the eastern region, but obviously across the country. And so because of that, obviously there's all types of thoughts around ways in which we could have terrorist attacks and threats. So I think it's to really ensure the American people that there is no impending further threat to the United States.
Well, if you watch the video, just moments showing how the bridge collapsed, you're wondering if there was any, or if there has been any loss of power supply to any of the areas on either side of the bridge as a result of the collapse.
Yes, and that's a very great point. One of the things I will state is that when you talk about power supply, typically that's above ground. And so there could be some power outages, obviously, where the bridge collapsed, the areas. And then on some of those external ends of the bridge, it could be power supply being shut off to prevent any further hazardous situations or events. But typically the power supply is above. And so there's minimal, if any, power supply for those buildings and communities surrounding the bridge.
So the ship is still lodged at one of the pillars of the bridge. And, you know, the owners say, you know, the crew, the captain, everyone has been accounted for. What happens now to the goods that are on the ship, the containers, and, you know, how long it will be there? Where do we go from here, Maria?
This is going to be a long process. I think we're going to be dealing with some import and export challenges, having to reroute ships. As you mentioned, even those goods that are currently on the ship, how are they going to come off of the ship? Typically, in situations like this in the U.S., they will bring another ship to be able to remove those items and put them on another ship that can obviously make its way. The question, though, is there a way around the ship to even get to the port? And I think until the rescue effort has been completed, I don't know if we're going to even begin to discuss some of those those logistical challenges that we are going to be facing for quite some time.
Thanks again, Maria.
Have a great day.
Politics now, still in the United States. Former President Donald Trump has called the decision of the New York court in his civil trial fraud case election interference. The appeals court in Manhattan reduced Mr. Trump's $455 million judgment to $175 million. The court also scheduled a criminal trial on April 15th over hush money paid to adult film actress Stormy Daniels. The former president has pleaded not guilty to the 34-count felony indictment.
Certainly not. This is all about election interference. This is all Biden-run things, meaning Biden and his thugs, because I don't know if he knows he's alive. And it's a shame. It's a shame what's happening to our country. This is election interference. They are doing things that have never been done in this country before. We've never had anything like it, certainly not at this level. Well, as I say, I have a lot of cash. You know I do because you looked at my statements. I mean, you've been examining my statements for a long time, and I have much more than that in cash. But I would also like to be able to use some of my cash to get elected. They don't want me to use my cash to get elected. They don't want that. They don't want me taking cash out to use it for the campaign. I don't do that. I think you'd be allowed to, possibly. I don't know. I mean, if you go borrow from a big bank, many of the banks are outside of this. As you know, the biggest banks, frankly, are outside of our country. So you could do that, but I don't need to borrow money. I have a lot of money. I built a great company. I don't know that you're going to have the trial. I don't know how you can have a trial like this in the middle of an election, a presidential election. And this is, again, this is a Biden trial. These are all Biden trials because Colangelo worked for Biden. Well, it could also make me more popular because the people know it's a scam. It's a Biden trial. This is a Biden. There is no trial. There's a Biden trial.
The UK High Court has ruled that WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange can take his challenge against extradition to the United States to another hearing. The hearing was adjourned until May 20 as judges at the High Court in London say they would ask the US government for 3 weeks to provide assurance that Assange could rely on the First Amendment right to US Constitution, which protects free speech. Speaking outside the court in London, Assange's wife, Stella, says she's astounded by the decision to delay her husband's appeal, calling on the Biden administration to drop the case. She says her husband is a political prisoner who's been persecuted because he exposed the true cost of war in human lives. Assange has been in the UK prison since 2019. He's wanted by the US for disclosing secret military files in 2010 and 2011. Back in 2021, the UK High Court ruled that he should be extradited, dismissing claims that his poor mental health meant that he might take his own life in a US jail. Federal agents have raided properties connected to American rapper Sean Diddy Combs. The Department of Homeland Security said it pursued the law enforcement actions as part of an ongoing investigation in New York, Los Angeles, and in Miami. 2 properties were searched in Los Angeles and Miami as part of the probe. According to officials, the raid was part of a federal sex trafficking investigation. Several recent lawsuits have accused Mr. Combs of sexual misconduct, including ex-girlfriend Casey. His attorneys have previously denied all of the allegations made against him in the lawsuits. Dozens of people are staging protests in Warsaw, Poland, against the country's migrant regulations. The demonstrators gathered outside the Polish Prime Minister's office following the death of a 32-year-old Pakistani man near the border between Poland and Belarus. Protesters lit candles, held banners and signs reading, "All migrants welcome. Each pushback is a death sentence." Since 2021, the Poland-Belarus border has seen a series of migrant crises. Local media reports the Polish government deported over 6,000 migrants who crossed the border from Belarus between July 2023 and January 2024. Here on the continent, 4 people, including a police officer, have died in an explosion at a small hotel near a station in Mandera, northeast of Kenya. 15 people were also injured. 2 critical cases were flown to the capital, Nairobi, while others have been admitted in hospital in Mandera. Investigators who blame Al-Shabaab for the attack say the blast was caused by an improvised explosive device that had been planted at the hotel and was detonated as a crowd of people sat down to eat breakfast. The latest attack followed another one on Sunday in coastal Kenya's Lamu County, where 2 police reservists were killed. Let's head to Senegal, where provisional results from the presidential election have put Bassirou Faye in a strong lead with about 53.7% of the votes, while Amadou Ba has 36.2%. His victory comes less than 2 weeks after he was released from jail. Faye has pledged to govern the country with humility and transparency. In his first speech after Sunday's poll, his main rival from the governing coalition, Amadou Ba, has already conceded defeat, setting the stage for the 44-year-old to become the youngest president in the country. One of Faye's main priorities as president will be national reconciliation following 3 years of unrest and a political crisis in the country. He's also vowing to fight corruption at every level, rebuild institutions, and tackle the cost of living crisis. He thanked outgoing President Macky Sall for helping to conduct a successful poll. Although the Constitutional Council is yet to officially announce the results, there is already jubilation across the country. Lawmakers in Togo have adopted a new constitution in which residents will no longer elect their president. A constitution was introduced by members of the ruling party on Monday, transitioning the country from a presidential to a parliamentary system. One of the main changes brought by the new constitution is that lawmakers will elect the president of the republic for a single 6-year term. The position of President of the Council of Ministers has been reduced. Its holder will have full authority and power to manage the affairs of the government. The President of the Council of Ministers will either be the leader of the party, which secures a majority during the legislative elections, or the leader of the winning coalition of parties. The country's opposition, which boycotted the last legislative elections in 2018 and recently denounced irregularities in the electoral census, is poorly represented in the National Assembly. It's not been determined what changes will come into force. The UN is calling for urgent international support to help avert a humanitarian crisis in Mali and in the Sahel. UNHCR's Assistant High Commissioner for Protection, Reuven Meninquela, during a recent visit to Mali, noted the stark realities faced by refugees, asylum seekers, internally displaced persons, and stateless individuals, emphasizing the need for enhanced solidarity and assistance. Mali is currently hosting over 66,500 refugees, while also grappling with 354,000 IDPs, highlighting the significant challenge of forced displacement across borders and within its territory. Recent movements across the Sahel underscore the fluidity and complexity of the crisis, with families fleeing violence and persecution, seeking safety and dignity under increasingly strained conditions.
So I've just been visiting an IDP site where there's some over 200 families here. They've been here since 2019. I've been talking to the men, to the women, and seen some of the children at play. The main thing from them is pretty clear. They want access to education for their children, they want some form of income, and they definitely want a solution to their situation. And we are here to work with the government and with all our partners to try and find that solution for them.
The French culture and languages up next. 60% of 321 million French speakers around the world live here on the African continent. That's according to Consul General Laurent Favier. Favier was speaking on the sidelines of the International French Day celebration here in Lagos.
A yearly celebration. We celebrate the Francophonie, the International Day of Francophonie, because this reminds us the day which was created, the first Francophone agency. It was on the 20th of March, 1970. So that's the landmark, if you want. Second, we celebrate on that day because it's the occasion to celebrate for the 88 member state of the International Organization of La Francophonie, and to celebrate the French world, the French-speaking world, all around the world on 5 continents. And today, I can say we are 321 million speakers in the world, and 60% These people are on the African continent. 11,000 Nigerians are learning French every year. That's huge. That's huge. And you are 15,000 teachers who teach French. That's huge too. And you can be proud of that. I don't know any other states who do that.
From West to Southern Africa now, where the Reserve Bank's Monetary Policy Committee will be announcing its decision on the country's interest rates on Wednesday. Following a series of meetings the committee has held this week, Governor Leseya Kayango has previously indicated that until inflation retreats to 4.5% in a sustainable manner and settles there, the central bank will be unwilling to adjust its policy stance. According to economists, the Reserve Bank's Monetary Policy Committee will maintain the repo rate at its current level.
One is expecting to see that our central bank will leave our interest rates unchanged. And why we know that inflation is still elevated, and yes, it's not just a local problem, even internationally, inflation is still at high levels. But the most important thing when it comes to central bankers is that they don't want to lose credibility, meaning they don't want to start decreasing interest rates sooner, and then thereafter it happens or it pans out that inflation continues to be very stubborn, because now that will force their hand again, making them to start increasing interest rates more rapidly. So they just want to be more convinced that in this fight against inflation, at least they've managed to win it. And also what is working to their advantage is that the concerns that we had earlier about the possible recessions are gradually fading away, because we can see more economic data continues to point to the fact that economies continue to be resilient.
We do not expect the Reserve Bank to hike the repo rate until further notice, if ever it will. To the contrary, it is foreseeable and predictable that there may be a possibility that towards the end of this year, not mid-year, towards the end of this year, the South African Reserve Bank may start cutting down the repo rate, provided that the major countries like the United States have also started doing so, because the South African Reserve Bank usually takes its cue from the United States of America Federal Reserve.
Nigeria's Consul General to South Africa, Andrew Diddy, has been honored by a group in the country where attendees praise his dedication to promoting cultural exchange and facilitating opportunities for Nigerians living in the country. Mr. Andrew Diddy has served as the Nigerian Consul General to South Africa for the past 2 years. Our correspondent Innocent Samosa captured the essence of the occasion.
It was a night filled with celebration and reflection as the Nigerian community in South Africa came together to bid farewell to Mr. Andrew Diddy, who has served as the Consul General for the past several years. Mr. Diddy expressed his gratitude for the warm reception he received during his tenure and highlighted the strong ties between Nigeria and South Africa.
When I came as the I provided a special venue for students every month. 20 passports express production for students. And the practice is still in place. Our officers are going to Kigali over 4 times this year to resolve this particular issue. But with no choice, we have to go again tomorrow. Find out how best who can assist our nationals.
Attendees praised Mr. Diddy for his dedication to promoting cultural exchange and facilitating opportunities for Nigerians living in South Africa.
I want to appreciate him because he's a father to the Nigerian students in South Africa, especially the passport policies, whereby he said that there's a special window for Nigerian students. As far as you're a student in South Africa, when you apply for your passport, you'll be issued a passport immediately.
What I will say is I met a man with human character. I mean a humble man that has human feelings.
Many shared fond memories of his leadership and commitment to serving the Nigerian community.
He's a man of integrity. That's what I like about his person, you know. And a person of integrity wants to do things properly. I resonate with that, which is why I really enjoyed his tenure here. And you can see he's not only got integrity, he's got compassion. Those are all things I resonate with, you know. I mean, to the point where he can take his own personal money, even though he doesn't have a big budget, but he can take his own personal money and help Nigerians in distress. I mean, that's going over and beyond. And that's the hallmark of someone who does his work well. You go over and beyond.
We extend our best wishes to Mr. Andrew Edie as he embarks on the next chapter of his journey. And we look forward to witnessing the continued growth of Nigerian-South African relations. From Johannesburg, South Africa, Innocent Samosa, Channels Television News.
Now, we all like football, but there are some people who love football, who really, really, really love football. But that love can only be seen in the number of jerseys you're able to collect. I bet you don't love football more than this Colombian enthusiast, whose home could pass for a mall. Gustavo Tubon's football journey began in 2005. He's acquired 7,800 jerseys since then. He has a new challenge, however. He now aims to reach a record of 8,000 jersey collections. His collections, which is the largest in the world, includes one signed by all Real Madrid players during Florentino Perez's management. The official largest football shirts collection is 1,077 and was achieved by Santiago Hank Guerrero in Mexico on March 17, 2023, according to the Guinness World Records. Let's take a quick update now from Senegal, where Bassirou Faye is set to have a strong lead, 53.7% of the votes already. And our correspondent, Kayla Megwa, is in Dakar, where she has been monitoring the situation. Kayla, why hasn't he been declared president already?
Hi, Amarachi. So there's a procedure here. Apparently, the appeal court has to make the announcement, and then some days are given for the people to be able to contest the result that's announced by the appeal court. Then after that, the Constitutional Council will then make an announcement. So it's all procedural. There is a clear winner, and of course everyone knows that this is going to happen, but they do have to follow the procedures that are in place, just so no one can come and say, oh, this procedure wasn't followed or this wasn't done. Remember, there are 19 people here. So, every single, procedure has to be followed. At least that's what we're hearing from officials, because but that can happen today. We might actually hear it by the end of today, but for now, nothing yet. But we are seeing the figures, 53.7%. We're seeing those reports coming from foreign media. However, the bodies that are necessary, that are in charge of, putting out exactly what has happened, exactly how much was, how much the person won in so and so area, because it's there are 14 regions here, so they have to be able to break that down, and everyone be able to look at it clearly and say, okay, this happened here, this happened there, were there irregularities? We're hearing from a lot of the observers. In fact, we're just coming back from a meeting of, all the foreign observers, and everyone is saying it was a very well coordinated exercise, right. Very marginal issues, but we have to wait for those procedures to be followed.
Thanks a lot, Kayla. And if he is confirmed, he will be the youngest African leader that we have had, 44 years old. Thanks again, Kayla. And that's the world today. Thanks for watching. I'm Amarachi Ubani.